love afresh this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. Welcome. If I haven't met you yet, my name's Alex. It's lovely to see you all and to enjoy church together. We are in a series called What Makes a Home, which is looking at how do we as people make home in the space between. So whether you've moved to Liverpool recently, or whether you're in a transient moment, or whether you might be new to your street or new in a place of work, how do you make your new surroundings a home? And we're taking inspiration from the Israelites who, just after they've left Egypt, they're left wandering the desert for a bit before God then gives them the Ten Commandments. So we're stuck in a couple of chapters in between as they're working out who they are as a community in this moment. So if you've got a Bible, don't worry, I'll come up on the screens if not, but we're going into Exodus 15 from verse 22. It says this. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they travelled into the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That is why the place was called Marah. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. There the Lord issued a ruling instruction for them and put them to the test. He said, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God, and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. Following Jesus is really, really easy when everything is going well. When the wind is breezing through some of your hair, obviously I don't feel that anymore, it goes through my beard though. When the kids are doing well at school, when everyone is healthy, when everything at work is going really well, when you've got a promotion, when you're getting on really well with your colleagues, when things are going like that, it somehow becomes super easy to love the people who annoy you, to be hospitable to the stranger even, to create room in your lives for others, to be generous with our resources and time, and to pray that even our foes flourish. But when things aren't going so well, it's a whole different ballgame. One day, I was super tired because we have 3 young children and they don't always sleep very well. And I had to get up early, put on my dog collar, which I wear occasionally, I'll remind some of you sometimes, and I had to go and marry some people. It was their wedding day. They had been thinking about this day all their lives, so they were loving it. But in my old job, I lived about 35 minutes away from the church that I worked at, and so I had to get on the tube. Anyone been to London on the tube recently? Or at all? Anyone not been on the tube? God bless you. You have escaped a horror. Anyway, I had to get on the tube early on a Sunday morning, and the problem with the tube early on a Sunday morning is you overlap with those who are coming home from Saturday night, right? And so I got on, I put my dog collar on, got on the tube, and some Londoners were coming on their way home as I was heading in. And one slightly inebriated commuter looked at me and he said, in the funny way that only inebriated people can, he was like, "I thought Vickers only worked on Sundays." Now usually, if the world was bright and I was full of vim and vigour and I had slept well, I would have probably chuckled and maybe started a conversation even about the nuances of clerical life. However, I turned to him and I just went, "Evil never sleeps." And because we all have our off days, right? We all have our off days. But how we continue to follow Jesus when it doesn't seem like everything is bright and rosy, when it seems like our circumstances rough, how do we follow Jesus in those moments? The thing is, Israel had just been set free from slavery, their oppression in Egypt. They've gone out in the desert and their plagues had all come to an end. God is leading them, we're told, by a cloud of pillar by night and by day, and fire by night. He did not lead them directly to the promised land because at the time Philistines were there and it would have sent them straight into war. And so what happens is the Egyptians see this and they say, "Hang about, they're just wandering around in the wilderness. We're going to go and get them back." And so God leads them around the wilderness. And as we heard last week, he parts the seas and then suddenly they're on the other side, and finally the Israelites have a taste of freedom. And this brings us to this chapter, which happens just 3 days later from that big moment of going through the Red Sea. And they're distressed, they're annoyed, They've found water finally. 3 days apparently, according to explorers like Bear Grylls. Apparently 3 days is like the limit that you can't have water in the desert. And so they're at this point, they think they found water, and yet they've come to a place called Mara, which is the Hebrew word for bitterness. And they find that there is water, yes, but it's bitter, it's salty. And here Israel learns an amazing lesson. And there are many lessons for us today, I think, that we can learn from this, but as we're travelling through deserts and faced with this bitterness, the question is this: how are we, as Christians, going to go through a place of bitterness and come out the other side? Because, I don't know about you, when I became a Christian when I was 16 years old, I thought becoming a Christian was a ticket to an easy life. I don't know, some of us might think that. I thought, well, God, like when I face annoyances in my life, when I find challenges, I'm like, God, I'm meant to be one of your favourite children. I'm meant to be one of the cool kids, one of the in crowd. I thought we'd be rescued from pain. I thought we'd be able to turn away from our experiences. I thought we'd be able to experience nothing but favour. God, I thought following you meant I'd be free from pain. And then I opened the Bible, and it's annoying. 2 Timothy 3:12, all who live a godly life will be persecuted. Matthew 5:10, blessed are those who are persecuted for their righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. 1 John 3:13, do not be surprised, brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. John 15:20, remember the word I said to you, a servant is not greater than their master. If they persecute me, says Jesus, they will also persecute you. Happy Sunday. The invitation to following Jesus is not a removal from reality. It's not escapism. It's not an emptying of pain and sorrow. Rather, I think, it's a heightened presence in the midst of reality. If God came to earth in his Son, then this earth matters. If he took on human form, then humanity matters. If he cried, if he laughed, if he had friends, if he ate and celebrated and mourned, then those things matter. The invitation to the Christian life is not one of escapism. Bless you, my child. We're told we're to go into the world, be a part of society, honour it and pray for those in leadership, be good citizens, do good and pursue righteousness. It's not about emptying ourselves of pain and sorrow, but it puts pain and sorrow in their proper place. They are momentary, seasonal, and never have the final word. Pain and sorrow gives us a glimpse into God's own heart, how he feels about his children, but we know, with a cross-shaped perspective and a sharp focus on the empty tomb of Jesus, that pain and sorrow is never our destination. And so how do we respond when our circumstances are bitter? Well, the Israelites' response in our story is one of annoyance, anger, and bitterness, we're told. The problem is they let the bitterness they encounter become part of who they were. Don't let bitter things make you bitter. They grumble against Moses, and isn't it true that when things aren't going our way, I don't know about you, but I do this all the time, it's too easy to look those above us rather than that's what's within. I've done it too many times. When something's not going right, then it must be the archdeacon's fault, or the bishop's fault, or the queen's fault, or God's fault. I don't know about you at work, it's always your supervisor's fault, and then your manager's fault, and then the company's fault, and then the world's fault. Theodore Roosevelt, who was a president, once said, complaining about a problem without posing a solution is called whining. Someone who's anonymous, probably because they say things like this, said that the only thing complaining does is convince other people you are not in control. I think it's true, isn't it? It's hard. And someone else said, a complaining tongue reveals an ungrateful heart. They've just been rescued from the abhorrence of slavery, seen God's act through plagues that put to death 10 of Egypt's gods, then parted the sea, and in that moment, they think that God will just leave them stranded. Each one of us, Jesus, has saved us by his grace, set our lives on a course to transformation, healed us, provided for us, blessed us, comforted us, and that thing that we simply can't shift in our mind, that thing that seems to be a huge obstacle, that thing that causes us to lose sleep. Do you really think that that's the moment that God says, well, I'm pretty good, but I'm not that good? Or I'm quite strong, but not that strong? Or actually, you stumped me there. That problem you're facing is one I just haven't thought about before. Verse 25 is probably the most challenging passage in this reading. Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. Stop whining. Stop complaining, being bitter. Cry out to God. You know, a recent study that as a pastor, it's quite hard to read this kind of thing, but recent studies showed that only 20% of Christians pray more than once a week. Only 20%. If you do anything else, as you're in this liminal space, this space between, work out regular habits in peacetime so that when it feels like you have to go to war, you can rely on muscle memory to keep you sustained. And I'm a huge fan of a book called Atomic Habits by a guy called James Clear. And he talks about habit stacking. And we've all got habits every day, don't we? Brushing our teeth, and sometimes twice a day even. Making a cuppa, I need to make 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Washing up, cooking, commuting to work. James Clear says stack your habits. So while you're doing those habits, add something on top of it. You don't have to find new time, you just stack them. So as you're waiting for 4 minutes for your coffee to percolate through the cafetiere, that's 4 minutes of prayer. While you're brushing your teeth, that's at least 3 minutes. If you do it twice, that's 6 minutes of prayer you're doing tomorrow that you weren't doing yesterday. Stack your habits on your commute. The thing is, it seems second nature to Moses. It's such a throwaway line that he just cried out to God in this moment, heard what God said, and did it. Because he had already built the habits in the peacetime. So when it felt like it came to war, he was able to rely on his muscle memory. He didn't bother having a conference about it. He didn't phone a friend. He didn't do an Instagram poll when the Israelites came to him. He simply cried out to God. And then God revealed a solution that was already there. So often, I think, and I count myself amongst this, we're just looking for a lightning bolt. We're looking for a heavenly choir or a neon sign saying, "Thus saith the Lord, this is what you should be doing with your life." The last time God told Moses to touch the sea with a piece of wood, the seas parted. And it wasn't because the stick was magic. The tree wasn't a special kind of tree that purifies water. I don't think such thing exists. It was a symbol that God was saying, I can do anything with anything. I just need you to trust me. Do you trust him? And when we look at our lives, we can sometimes be faced with what appears to be a truly bitter situation. Sometimes the answer just lies in a wholehearted trust in God that he will, as Colossians 1 says, reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. And there have been many times throughout our marriage, mine and Laura's, where I've faced, and we have faced together, bitter situations, financial pressures, illness in our family, a mate of mine dying in a car accident. Chaos does not leave us when we follow Jesus, and it's really annoying. I remember getting the call the hour before I was meant to preach on a Sunday, that a best mate of mine had died in a car accident. And I was like, but I'm meant to be preaching, God. Like, surely you should protect me from this stuff. He does not protect us from it. Why? Because he's trying to create us a faithfulness and a trust in those situations. Don't allow those things to become part of who we are. We live in a reality where we're both in the now and not yet of the kingdom of God. We see glimpses of God's provision that reminds us there will come a time where we'll live in an eternal state of God providing day in, day out. We see glimpses of God's healing, so we're reminded that it will come a time where there will be no pain or suffering and we'll be made eternally whole. The now and not yet of God's kingdom. And here we see the Israelites experiencing this. They're given a brief provision to remind them they will one day experience eternal refreshing. Even the land of milk and honey that the Israelites were so longing after was only ever supposed to be a foretaste of what was to come, the eventual destination of God's people, where there will be no sickness, no pain, no suffering or mourning, for the former things have passed away. And we're reminded here that the answer to the biggest concerns of life do not lie within. You know, that kind of thing that is being said a lot at the moment, just be yourself, or just do you, or all that stuff. The answer to life's biggest questions does not lie within. We need external help. Like a patient in saving, all of us are thirsty. All of us are wandering the desert of life, seeking refreshment, and it can only be found and nourished in the person of Jesus. Amazing story in Jesus' life, where he encounters a woman at a well who knows she's messed up, know she's been pushed out by society, that she's living a life publicly that she knows that people publicly don't approve of. And what does Jesus say to her? At the well even. He says this, that if you listen carefully... Sorry, no, he doesn't say that. He said, that's coming up. He says, all who are thirsty may drink from me, not even the well. All who are thirsty may drink from me, Jesus, and have their thirst quenched. And God says to Moses, if you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. And then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. And what we now have is we have the beginning of the entire saga of our Bibles, where people forget this moment. They forget it, and they try and quench their thirst in all kinds of ways, through other gods, through wealth, through power, through inappropriate relationships, and God has to remind them time and time and time again, just trust me. Just trust me. And so do we. The thing is, in this story, and many more, if we just hold on to hope, God always over-delivers. Elim had enough springs to go around and even shade in the desert. But so what, right? We all face bitterness. We all face difficult times. I know a lot of you are going through them right now. And this is not a talk where the message is, just do more and it will be okay. Because there's another moment in the Bible where a piece of wood has been the solution to a bitter situation. The cross of Jesus Christ, soaked in the bitterness of our mess. And in the end, as Jesus obeys God's command, he takes it to the cross, and Jesus becomes all the bitter things that we in our life now experience, and we get to sample the sweetness of life that was Jesus's. Because it's only the cross, ultimately, that heals both our hearts and the bitter experiences we face. It's his grace that heals in the here and the now and the ever after. And so in this in-between space, if you're working out how to make a home, it's this. Make sure you drink from the right pool. Make sure the drink that you're serving at your meal is the right drink. Jesus is always the only answer, not just in Sunday school, but also in everyday life. He will satisfy all the alcohol, drugs, relationships, promotions, kids in great schools, extensions on our homes, trophies in our cabinets, or year of experiences always promise to provide. All who are thirsty, come and drink from the well that never runs dry. And so we're going to pray. We're going to ask that those of us who are feeling exhausted and in need of refreshment will be filled with the Spirit of God that gives us everything that we can need. And for some of us, we might be feeling like everything is going tickety-boo, and it's your job to provide shade for those who are knackered and worn out. Should we stand and we're going to pray? And if you're comfortable, why don't you just close your eyes.